even though children like to fight limits and rules, it makes them feel very safe to know that someone is steering the ship.
Yeah. If everything feels possible, then also everything feels possible, right? Hey, Claire, we're back together again.
Hi, Rachel. We're together for another episode today, and we're going to talk about a topic that's a little bit different than some of the child development things we usually discuss. Today, we're going to talk about parenting styles, which is kind of a personal topic. I think there can be some nuance involved when you think about your parenting style, your parents' parenting style, how it all unfolds.
Yeah, I think that everything about parenting and everything about relationships feels very individual. And there are a lot of components that are individual and shaped by the people that are in that relationship. But there are some broad categories of parenting styles or raising children styles. I think we should make sure that we're including guardians or anyone else raising children in this conversation too. So while the traditional terminology would be parenting, where this is meant to include anyone caring for and raising young children. So it's very nuanced, as is every relationship, but there are a lot of commonalities and a spectrum of styles that we want to talk about. And there's both some research behind it, and there are these more modern, catchy names that people use too. So we'll talk about both of those things. But before we do that, should we talk about nature and nurture? Because that's kind of at the root of it all.
Yeah, this is a question that I actually tackled when I was getting my graduate degree because I found it so fascinating. Like, what is it that makes a child turn out the way that they turn out? Is it 100% their genetics? Is it 100% their environment? Is it the teachers? Is it the parents? Is it your friends? So I kind of dove into that a little bit. And it's kind of an age-old debate in the parenting space. Is it nature or nurture?
Yes. And so I love that you framed it like that, because it doesn't need to be a debate anymore. The science is here to tell us what's going on. And so we know now, but we're still sort of stuck in this nature nurture debate because that has been forever and ever, for decades, where people have framed it like that as a versus, but actually the two work together.
Yes.
So nature is your genetic predispositions and your biological makeup. We all show up with stuff. We are genetically predispositioned for certain character traits, personality traits, skills, strengths. But what happens to us, including in the womb, but what happens to us, very importantly in early childhood, shapes that genetic disposition and we're able to express or not express parts of our biological makeup. So what we want to do as families, as parents, is help children flourish and figure out what their strengths are and support them to grow other skills and aptitudes that they might not have as much of a predisposition for, but are helpful to them. So the reason we're bringing it up here is because, again, your child is not showing up as a blank slate. That is old thinking.
Yeah.
Your child is showing up as a full human being with stuff in there already. They have a blueprint in there, if you will. But the experiences, the relationships, and the environment shape all of that and allow them to, again, express all of that to their very best potential, or get in the way of them expressing all that. And that's where parenting styles come in. So you cannot make them be who they are not going to be, but you can also certainly shape and guide and be the light that leads them to the place that they're meant to go.
Yeah, there's something about potential there. That's what the word that keeps coming to mind when I hear you talk. We all have potential to flourish and thrive. And that's part of our genetic code. That's part of the nature part of things, like you're saying. And then what happens to us starting from in the womb all the way through forever, because we never stop growing and learning, kind of helps us either meet that potential or maybe, and the good news is that we also talked about this on past episodes, children are very resilient. We know that as well. So one bad day is not going to ruin their potential or prevent them from flourishing. When I think about parenting styles, I think a lot, I hear just being on social media and consuming, Substack posts and TikTok and Instagram, all these things. There's a lot of parenting style terms that are tossed around. I've been a parent for 17 years, and I've heard tiger parenting, helicopter parenting, Gentle parenting, that's a really popular one right now. Free range parenting, another popular one is snowplow parenting. There's a lot of different terms out there, but these are all pretty colloquial. They are all kind of developed by, some of them were maybe researchers in the field, but a lot of them were influencers and bloggers. And so what I wanted to talk about today with you, Rachel, is what we know, as we always do in this podcast. What is the research saying? What does the science say? So I've always thought of parenting as an art and a science. The art part is up to you and the way you use your paintbrush every day with your children, but the type of paintbrush you pick up is actually pretty important. So that's what we could start with today.
That's a good way to think about it. And there's a lot of intentionality. We talk about that with teachers all the time, is being intentional. I meant to do that. I meant to say that. I meant to not say that. And when you're with children all the time, stuff is going to happen. Of course, you want to be natural. You don't want to be rehearsed. You want to enjoy it. Being with the children, you absolutely want to be in the moment and playful and have quality time. But if you have this idea of what kind of style in general you need to adopt, you'll make choices that are intentional within that. And that's pretty important. So yes, maybe like one day you get really frustrated and you raise your voice and you're like, that doesn't line up. And that's okay. That's okay. But in general, having this fairly consistent approach to parenting is good. And I, some of those names like helicopter parenting, it gives you this visual of a complex set of research ideas or studies that have happened. And someone gives it this term helicopter parenting, and it simplifies it probably too much. It's sort of deductive or reductive, but it also gives you a visual. And the hovering, right? The hovering is not a great visual. So it helps us kind of sort out which thing is what we want to do. So let's dive into it. I think one of the ones you like to talk about is to go back to some original theory around parenting styles.
Yes, it's one of my favorite things to talk about is the work of Dr. Diana Baumrind. I think of her as a pillar in the parenting research world. She was doing her research in the 1960s and 1970s out in Berkeley. And she did a longitudinal study and studied children from early childhood through their adolescence and young adulthood. And she, over the course of that study, came up with this framework. And I'm going to try to do my best to describe it for our listeners. It's a little bit easier to describe when you've got like a matrix on a PowerPoint slide, but I'm going to do my best. So essentially, she was looking at two types of measures: how warm and nurturing parents were towards their children. So that's that strong attachment, that really warm, nurturing responsiveness in parenting. That's, it can be low or high in that. And then the other part of the scale were expectations, control, demands, or as I like to call them, limits. It's kind of a more modern parenting term. Or how many limits, how much control are your expectations, low or high for your kids? So again, warmth and nurturing on one side of the scale, and then the other side of the scale is expectations and demands. And she used this to kind of broadly categorize parents. And she started with 3 categories. A 4th one was added on about 20 years later by other researchers who picked up her work. So I thought we could just go through her original three styles. And as we're describing them, I'm going to encourage all the listeners to think really intentionally about, what kind of parent are you most days? As Rachel mentioned, you're going to have moments where you like tiptoe into another style, but more often than not, where do you fall right now? And I also invite you all to think about, how were you parented? Which can get it's a really interesting observation about yourself that maybe you haven't considered so far.
Yeah. And maybe I would suggest even thinking about it less about that you've taken on a different style for a day, but that you're implementing a practice that is more closely aligned with a different style. So you didn't change who you are as a parent. You just, maybe you did something that's a little permissive one day, but that doesn't mean you suddenly turned into a permissive parent, which I know I'm getting into the styles, but there's certainly some nuance in there. Consistency is important. We're going to definitely talk about that, but you get to be a real human. You get to be a real human as a parent. And you can also apologize and say, hey, that wasn't my best work. So let's talk about these styles, but also don't get fixated on making a mistake within the style, because that will also lead to some challenges.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, I'm going to start with authoritarian parents.
Mm-hmm.
So authoritarian parents, if you're thinking back to the measures that we just described, authoritarian parents are parents who are very high in control and demands. They have very high expectations for their children. Lots and lots of limits put on these children. low in warmth and nurturing. So this is the kind of parenting style where punishment is really common. Communication in the relationship is pretty much a one-way street from parent down to child. This is like the my way or the highway, my house, my rules. A lot of, like Anna mentioned, there's a lot of rules in this relationship, but the rules aren't necessarily explained to the child. The logic behind and listen, we're going to talk about this in a moment. Children do need rules, but it's also important to explain why they're needed to children.
A little bit of like, because I said so.
Yes, because I said so. Really, really high expectations for the children's behavior. And not a lot of flexibility with that. And so, and not a lot of warmth that comes through in those. So I actually sometimes think about this as like a more old school type of parenting. Like this is a pretty common parenting style in my parents' generation, I think.
Yeah. I think, and just to qualify the difference between love and warmth, because a lot of parents, they will have love for their children and believe that this approach is what their child needs, but it's not warm, and it can feel like the love is conditional. And that's an important distinction, because what you don't want is children to grow up thinking they receive love as a reward for certain behaviors versus they are just loved. And that is what you can get into that with this style without meaning to. You can be very well meaning and think that this is the right thing to direct your child so they will be successful, so they don't fall into any traps that you're worried about. But you get some consequences that you may not be intending. One of them is a child is likely, it's not deterministic, but likely to feel like they have to prove something or be something specific in order to have value. And listening to this wants that to happen to their kids.
That's right. And these children who are raised in these households also typically have a hard time with authority when they grow up. They're also have a harder time making decisions on their own, being independent decision makers, because they've been raised in a household where someone was always telling them what the next thing to do was.
Yep.
So there are some impacts.
Like, and how to define. So their identity is really wrapped up into what somebody else has defined as successful.
That's right. The next style we're going to talk about is permissive parents. So this is the other side of that quadrant. These are parents who are very, very low in limits and control, and super high in warmth and nurturing and love. So like all these, like great point that you made earlier, Rachel, all these parents love their kids, right? But a permissive parent loves their kids, and they're kind of let children
friend more than their parent.
Yes. Exactly. It's more of a friendship than a parenting. Communication is open both ways, but parents really kind of let children decide what's going on for themselves rather than providing any structure or guidance when needed. Really low, limited expectations or no expectations set at all. Like, you can do your chores, you cannot do your chores. I don't really care what's happening with that class that you might be failing. Like, I'm not really, you want to run around the restaurant screaming and doing whatever you want. That's fine. Right. So, and we've all seen this happen, right? I've seen it happen in TV shows and movies. I've seen it happen in real life. And it has consequences as well. The impact of this parenting style, Dr. Baumern found children who are raised in permissive households have a hard time, again, with taking responsibility for their actions, having a hard time with some of the critical thinking skills. Actually, what's interesting is that children raised in permissive households are sometimes really anxious, because even though children like to fight limits and rules, it makes them feel very safe to know that someone is steering the ship.
Yeah. If everything feels possible, then also everything feels possible, right?
Exactly.
So if you can kind of do what you want, when you get into a situation where you can't, it's really difficult for you. And you have a hard time collaborating, negotiating.
Yes.
You have a hard time even just like doing something that builds relationships, because you are used to kind of it going your way or not having a consequence for something. And that just doesn't work in real life, right? So we don't want to set them up for that. But yes, they can feel just so boundaryless, right? And you think adults are funny to watch in this situation, because little kids handle this kind of thing better when you're just like, here's your materials, or do whatever you want. And they're like, okay. Adults are like, but what are the rules? What are the guardrails? What are the, and so it's sort of like living your whole life without guardrails or any kind of clarity about what the lines are. And kids like, especially in the teen years, will love this style of parenting
Oh,
or
yeah.
love it because and it's, I'll admit myself, I definitely knew who had permissive parents when I was in high school because we went to their house a lot.
100%. I'm living that life right now. My daughter has that pegged for sure.
Right. But you don't, in the end, that isn't the right style of parenting. So in some moments it can feel really good and you get some reinforcement of as a parent in that permissive parenting, but it's they need you to play the role of parent.
Yes.
They have others that are their friends. It's great to be a friend of your child, of course, but it is not more important than being their parent.
That's right. And that leads us to the last part of the framework from Dr. Baumern, which is authoritative parents, not authoritarian. She gave them two very similar names. I know.
Yeah.
I don't know why she did this. No one in her lab told her.
Yeah, no one. Because it was the research, right? The research probably drove it, and those were the words. Those are the words.
Right.
But I actually have shared this with some people, and they fact checked me because they were like, "You're talking about the same thing in two different ways." I'm like,
No.
I know, no, I mean,
No.
It's fine. Fact check me, you should, but also,
Yes. So authoritative parents are high in warmth and nurturing and high in healthy limits and clear expectations. So there is discipline in authoritative household, but it's not punishing discipline. It's actually true discipline which means to teach. You're trying to guide your child. So you're going to give your child a rule. You're going to explain the rule. Your child's still going to break the rule because that's what children do. And then you're going to bring them back with some positive discipline and say, okay, let's figure out the feeling behind what caused you to break this rule. I'm going to re-explain why this limit is important. I'm trying to keep you healthy, safe. This is the expectation in the social setting that we're in. We're going to try again. Right. So high in warmth and nurturing. I see you. This is tough for you. And I'm still going to hold the limit.
Yeah.
So it's that warmth combined with the limits. It's really, really effective.
And it's not a trade-off, right? I will love you even though I'm giving you a limit. I am going to help you correct that because that's my job as a parent and that's what you need from me as a parent. So there will be some sort of natural consequence. Certainly, I will guide you. I will facilitate. And it's also, I think it's a recognition that children's skills and knowledge are developing and that you're there to help that along the way. We often talk about that as scaffolding, meaning really this, like your child is able to do this and your job as someone who's supporting young children develop is to get them to the next place, not to do it for them, not to let them not do it, to challenge them appropriately for that particular child, not just a one size fits all, and to get them to that next place. And sometimes that is learning in a difficult situation. So we often refer to it as positive guidance because that word feels clearer in terms of what you're trying to do. But we've actually listed positive guidance at Bright Horizons as an instructional strategy. So it's not a reactive punishment. It is a way, you're like, an opportunity to teach my child a skill. Oh, my child does not have this skill set yet. I get to teach them something. Now, I probably never once as a parent thought like that when they were doing something that was not great. Like, oh, great, I get a teaching opportunity. But I certainly knew that's what that was happening and used it to our advantage many times, as hard as it is in the moment and as frustrating as it can be. Whether they're two and they keep, throwing a block across the room at their siblings, no matter what you've told them, or they're 15 and they keep, trying to do something, they should not be doing, or whatever it is, whatever range that is. You want them to know there are some limits, but that they can come to you. So that's the authoritative parenting, which is now, I think the terminology you and I have heard more recently is lighthouse parenting or balanced parenting. And those give you that visual of what we're talking about, balance between limits and warmth, lighthouse guiding the way.
Yeah. What we know about children from Dr. Baumern's research is that the impact on children is the strongest in authoritative parenting. Rather, it's the most positive impact. So children who are raised in authoritative households know they can make mistakes and that they're still going to receive that warmth and nurturing. So their resilience is higher. Yeah. They're more confident. Because they know someone's going to be there to keep the guardrails on the highway and still love them at the end of the day. Even if they make a mistake, they're more confident walking into almost every scenario. So there's confidence. Yeah. They're critical thinkers. Another aspect of authoritative parenting that I really like, that I encourage all of you to employ as your children maybe like teeter out of toddlerhood into that preschool, kindergarten age, is to have your child have input into rules or goals, right? Like, oh, I can see you're having a hard time with this rule. Let's talk about what's hard about it, right? As children's brains just grow and get bigger, they can become part of the conversation. I want to be really clear. I'm not saying that you should be permissive and say, oh, you don't like that rule? Just forget it. You know what? You don't like bedtime? We'll just forget bedtime. Oh, you want to run around screaming in the library? That's fine. I like to use my library examples, Rachel. But it's talking to them about, like, why is this hard? And is there something that we could do together that we could make this a little bit easier for you, right? Getting their buy-in. That's part of authoritative parenting. And what happens is that turns into a child that goes to elementary school, high school, college, their first job, and has the confidence to advocate for themselves, and also the awareness to be a good collaborator and be a good communicator with other people. And that all stems back to that authoritative parenting, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, exactly. I think I know I've said this multiple times, and it's probably because this is the age my children are, but I think about when they get to college, and I would invite families to think about that too, is just get yourself 20 years from now or 15 years from now, however old your children are. What do you want them to be able to do and think and feel when you are not there? It's not a guarantee. There is no, unfortunately, no, if you do this, then they'll be able to do this. But you're increasing the odds significantly that they'll be able to do some of the things you'll want them to do with this approach, authoritative approach or balanced approach. So, and both of my kids had this scenario where they had roommates, where one roommate had never had to clean anything in their lives, so had no idea how to contribute to this household. Some roommates were super anxious about grades and were just so stressed out and taking classes they didn't even want to take because that's what they thought was going to get them. Their parents were going to approve of that. So just think about all the scenarios about what you want them to be able to do, and think you want them. I mean, we all want our children to do well in school, but do you want them to, maybe they didn't get a good grade and they can still sleep that night and they can learn from it and they can get better. That's what we want. We want them to be able to meet people they've never met before, even though it's a little stressful, and form new relationships. We want them to figure out how to have good social interactions and be able to interact with other adults and get feedback from people and be able to do a job interview and all those things. Think of all the things you want them to be able to do when you're not standing right next to them, and then make your parenting decisions now to get you on that path that gives them the best chance. Again, not a guarantee, but the best chance to get there. And I think if you think about that scenario, or even at work, if you're thinking about the people you want to work with, are you doing the things right now to have your child have the best chance at being the kind of person people want to work with?
We always talk about playing the long game. And I think for parents of toddlers and preschoolers, that's a very long, it feels like it's so far out, but it's really not. And I will tell you, it does that framework that you lay down now. My son just said yesterday, Mom, you're kind of a serious mom sometimes. And I was like, thank you for the compliment. I think that's amazing, because I'm not dealing with any shenanigans today. I was setting some limits with him, and he was like, oh, you're so serious. And I was like, just doing my job. I will be here. I will be here no matter what.
I love that approach when someone kind of, especially your kids, try to critique you, and you're like, thank you.
Yeah,
that's what I'm aiming for.
Exactly.
I do want to give you limits. And you, like you said, they're going to push up against them, whether they are 1 year old or they are 20 years old. And that is part of what they do. That is how, and in fact, maybe last thing we can say about these styles, I know we would take a break and get in some practical things, but in fact, when they push against them, they are testing those things a bit. They are testing their limits, and they need to know that they're still there. So there's some flexibility. Sure, maybe you've made a mistake. Maybe you made an assumption. Maybe it's not, you don't need to be as strict about it, or maybe you were too permissive about it and you have to adjust. So there can be certainly flexibility, and you want that, but that is part of brain and a human development, is to push up against boundaries. And when they do that with you, if you're doing authoritative parenting, they feel safer knowing that those are reliable and consistent. If it's a free-for-all, they do feel less safe. And if it's too rigid, they also can't develop who they are and develop all those resilient skills we want for them.
All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of these modern parenting styles we hear so much about.
Did you know that you can get the Teach, Play, Love brand of learning for your preschooler every day? The very people you trust for parenting advice are behind our Bright Horizons preschool program. Learning adventures that inspire kids to reach their unique potential. One-of-a-kind preschool for your one-of-a-kind kid. That's Bright Horizons. Enrollment is happening now. Visit brighthorizons.com to find a center near you.
Okay, we are back to finish up our conversation on parenting styles. So we just reviewed Dr. Baumerin's work with all of you. And I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that there are some more modern takes on parenting styles. And my feeling is that they all kind of ladder back up to Baumerin. Baumerin was kind of the OG parenting researcher. So for example, if you think about tiger parents, that's the really high control, high expectation parent where achievement is really emphasized. That sort of sounds like an authoritarian parenting style to me. Free range parents, those are the parents that give children tons of independence with very few limits. Sounds like permissive. The snowplow parent, this is when I read an article about, I think it was in the New York Times a few years ago. And that one gave me so much pause because I was thinking, oh my gosh, is this me? A snowplow parent, just like what a snowplow does to a snowbank. They just kind of ram themselves into a child's life. They take prisoners. They're just knocking trees down. They're making kind of a mess of things, but they're really trying to take a lot of control. So that sounds like authoritarian. Gentle parenting is a really popular term right now. I work with a lot of Bright Horizons parents who ask me about that. I actually think gentle parenting gets sort of a bad rap in social media. I think it actually is authoritative parenting in its spirit, but people hear the word gentle parenting and they assume that means permissive. Mm-hmm. When I think true gentle parenting actually is pretty authoritative. It's a pretty good mix of warmth and limits. But it's got kind of a bad reputation right now. There's another parenting style that Rachel and I both really like called lighthouse parenting. Rachel, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so again, there is a term, balanced parenting, which I do really like that terminology. And lighthouse parenting is giving a visual and some more analogy. It's a rich analogy environment, lighthouse parenting, and I love a good analogy. So it's this idea of you are showing them the way, but you are not doing it for them. So we'll just kill this analogy if we keep going with it. So we say like if a lighthouse is showing where the dangers are, where the shore is, where the kind of guardrails and the rules and the limits of things are, it is helping someone go out to sea, which is what we're doing. This is a hard, I'm so sorry if this hits anyone emotionally. It has definitely hit me emotionally to think about this as, and I know many people listening to this that are at a different stage. So I've had to accept it. Your kids live longer not with you than they live with you.
Oh, that is hard to hear.
So even if they stay till they're 25, they're still longer out in the big wide world without you right there by their side. So I give that to you only not to make you choke up emotionally, although it's a hard one, but yeah. That you are thinking about that period of their lives, and this period of their lives that they're with you is joyful and great and full of memories and sweet and all those good things. And it is also getting them prepared developmentally to be all the things that we want them to be later. So you're going to send them out to sea, and you do want that for them. You want them to be able to go out to sea. But you also want them to be able to find their way back easily. And you want them to be that safe place that they can come if there are trouble on the seas. You want to be the phone call. You don't want them to be like, my parents going to do everything with me. They're not going to care at all, or I'm going to get disowned by this behavior. Right. You want them to feel in that moment when they need you that you can be the phone call, that they can find their way back to you, that you are going to love them, even if there are consequences for whatever happened. And they may have already gotten natural consequences, a grade, a friend doesn't like them, they had a breakup, whatever, they didn't get a job, whatever happens out in the real world, you don't have to keep providing consequences for them. But I think that's one of the reasons I like this lighthouse analogy so much, because it gives you that nice real visual. And that's what, lighthouses are for. And so I think that figuring out where the right balance for you is in terms of warmth and making sure these children know that you love them no matter what. And they will tell you they don't love you. And they will tell you, you must not love me because you did not give me 10 desserts tonight. But it is in your behavior and in your intention, not in what they tell you. And then having those limits. So one of the things, I think we even have an episode on this, right? When we talk about risks and healthy risks and why that's important. And I've heard a lot of people talking about what you want. Again, we talk a lot about the long game, that you want courageous kids. So in order to be courageous, they have to have a few little risks that they have to work out. We're not talking about hazardous things where they're going to like break a bone or something. We're talking about even just like the swings on the playground or trying to be in a new friend group or just little things that take a little bit of risk taking. We want them to do that. So in that lighthouse parenting, that's kind of happening. You have to get down those rocks. You have to get out in the sea. But you as the parent, you gave them fishing equipment. You gave them a flashlight. You gave them whatever, all that big suit, whatever it's called, and you get wet or whatever, all the things.
you packed that boat. And then you kind of set them off into the waves, and it's, oh my gosh, it is hard to think about.
Really good lunch, and off they are. But you did all those things, but you didn't do it for them, and you didn't prevent them from trying to do it to themselves, and you made sure that they know and feel like they are capable. So I think that's maybe the best benefit of authoritative parenting is that in the end, they're going to feel capable. And that they can do it, even if they can't do it today. That they have the confidence and the self-concept that they are able to get there in the end, and they don't need you to be able to do that. And really, in the end, that's what we want for our kids. We want them to call us, and we want them to feel capable. And that's
we're trying to put ourselves out of a day-to-day job, which is really hard. It's a tough pill to swallow. So if anyone wants to learn more about Lighthouse Parenting, it's the work of Dr. Ken Ginsburg. I really like some of his books. So I think before we let everyone go, I just want to emphasize that when I talk to parents about parenting style, I really like to say this is a nice practice and reflection. So I do a lot of my parenting reflection when I get in bed at night and I'm staring at the ceiling, and I try to say more often than not today. Yeah. My 3 kids I do parent them differently. They're different children with different temperaments, and my temperament, there's a whole other podcast episode we can do about how your temperament kind of bumps up against your children's temperament sometimes. But I like to do this. I do. And actually talking about it with you, Rachel, is going to spur another round of reflection for me. Like, how has this week been going? How has this month been going? What do we have coming up in the next few weeks? Can I be intentional going into some of these bigger end of the school year milestones to be as authoritative as possible? Here are some limits. Here's some guardrails. And also, I trust you to go out and take some healthy risks and be resilient and be kind and thoughtful. And if you know what, if you fall down on your face, literally or figuratively, I will be here as the lighthouse. You can come back. I will be a warm light that you can row towards, hopefully forever.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned trust. I think that's a really important part. I can trust you. I can count on you. And they feel the same way. It's a reciprocal trust relationship. So let's wrap this up with a practical example. So you have your 3-year-old and it is dinner time. And while they have loved chicken every single day of their life so far, today they hate it. And they're kicking and they don't want to sit at the table and they are frustrated. And of course, you're going to scan and see, like, how was their day? Are they tired? What are the things? So you're kind of thinking about what maybe led to this behavior. So you're not just immediately giving them consequences for the behavior or going towards punishment for the behavior.
Right.
When and they want something else. And they want to sit wherever they want. They want to sit in the middle of the table and they're ordering up a whole new meal. And in that moment, you can say, here are the choices. I see that you're frustrated. I see tonight that you don't want chicken. Here are 3 choices or 2 choices for you. So that is, I recognize you. I see you. You are a person with opinions, even though they change every second. but then here are some limits and how we're going to handle this situation.
Right.
You can make this choice. And if you make this choice, this is what will happen. And if you make this choice, this is what will happen. You don't turn into a short order cook. You don't kind of do whatever they're asking you to do. And again, to our point, maybe one night you do turn into a short order cook because you got to get through the night. Everyone's got to get to bed. We're not saying all or nothing, but that's kind of what it looks like in practical life. Is you meet those moments with love and empathy.
That's right.
And understanding who they are, where they are developmentally. And you also provide choices and limits that do not permit or over permit the behavior that they're choosing to express themselves with, but you guide them back to appropriate behavior. So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. And I bet everyone hearing an example like that, hopefully you felt, oh, this isn't as hard as maybe it sounds. And also, I think most of you are thinking, I already do that. So we want that for you. We want you to feel great about your parenting or whatever relationship you have living or raising young children, and know that this is very, as Claire, as you just said, you individualize for each one of your children and develop a relationship that will not only be wonderful and joyful when they're young, but sustained throughout life.
Get parenting advice from Rachel and Claire. You can leave them a voicemail by calling 617-673-8881, and your question may be answered in a future episode of Teach, Play, Love. You can also send them an email at teach.playlove@brighthorizons.com. For more expert guidance on early childhood development, check out our family resources at brighthorizons.com.
Thanks for listening.
Subscribe to us. Find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
See you next time on Teach, Play, Love.
And discover parenting as the joy it was meant to be.